Thank you. We have some time for questions. Any questions from either side?
Thank you very much, Nisha, for that interesting. I will need to have a look at your book to see where it is going. Which sounds to me that this is very much like mission creep. The way the law is being, not the law, but the practice is being slowly tightened without actually public scrutiny of the process. So this whole question of the method behind extradition to the US, right? As you said in the beginning, there needed to be effective demonstration of guilt or charge. Now it seems it's just a request and then that person can go. What I wanted to say is this something which is disproportionately applied to Muslims or ethnic minorities, or is it now become blanket? I know some bankers have also been charged and taken away. The second question is that my worry now is that things like supporting BDS may become criminalized. In the States, it is already in many states. So what would be a strategy to combating that? Because that will be a real attack on any peaceful show of displeasure at what is happening.
Thank you for the questions. So in response to the first, with regards to extradition, can you hear me? Oh. With regards to extradition, actually, I mean, this is why very in the total number of the total number of individuals who've been extradited from Britain to the US between 2003, I think, and 2000, and I think the last figures I had were, say, 2015. There's only like 11 Muslim cases who were all extradited on the grounds of terrorist charges. It's a very small percentage of the total number of extraditions that happen over this period. But it's the terrorism cases that do all the work for changing the system. And of course, in non-terrorism cases, there's you're not going to spend 3 years pre-trial in solitary confinement. So the conditions of that extradition are much more kind of humane or might adhere to some kind of justice system. Not always. The point is that the way in which, they wanted to change the extradition arrangements prior to 2001. There are already conversations in place. It's just that the 9/11 thing and the Muslims thing allows them to do it. So it's about the way in which Islamophobia becomes the enabler or the sort of justification for these things. Yeah. Yes. So Gary McKinnon.
Yeah, which also applied to Babur's friend.
Right. So there's lots of differences in the way in which Muslims are treated versus white British citizens. And of course, if we don't just think about extradition, but we think about counterterrorism, then it is disproportionately Muslims who are being who are being targeted or who are being feeling the weight of these measures. But when we look at other, so if you look at things like stop and search under schedules, stop and search under counterterrorism legislation is disproportionately impacting Muslims, and actually, I think disproportionately impacting like Pakistani and Iraqi men. But if you look at stop and search under the criminal justice legislation, that's disproportionately impacting black men, right? So they're very similar techniques that are used through different avenues to target different othered or different marginalized communities. Sorry, the Schedule 7 stop, but it's like, I can't remember which section it is of the, the 40, yeah. So the avenue that the police will use targets different communities, for different things, but there are parallels. And in terms of, just in response to the BDS question, actually it already is criminalized because, through Prevent, BDS is being criminalized. So at universities, anyone who's, not universally, but when meetings are being held around Palestine, or when certain, so just this week it was revealed that King's College London have barred some students who are associated with Palestine. We have meetings and conferences that have been shut down. There are lots of ways in which, through Prevent, BDS has been criminalized, and of course, universities and higher, education institutions are becoming much more, scrutinizing much more the behavior of any kind of political meeting or political dissent, and BDS is a big part of that. Please.
A lot of it is under the radar.
Yeah.
Because I remember a case in the University of East London. Professor Richard Falk was coming, and suddenly the thing was cancelled.
Right.
Of course, he is of Jewish origin, but he's very pro-Palestine. And it was the directive from the chancellor to cancel it.
Right.
It wasn't like a lower level people.
Right.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right, thanks, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to ask, it's quite worrying here listening to you. So I have 3 children born in this country. And I'm an immigrant, so obviously I have African by birth. Ancestry comes from India. So my worry is that by even talking to someone that then happens and they get, or something happens, are there any organizations that we should know of who we can get support from as a community? Because any one of us in this room at any stage with the way things are going could fall foul in the name of national security, which is quite worrying. And it's quite amusing to me that I work in an environment where I'm told to uphold British values. So I often, when I'm told to uphold, we talk about it and we say it, but the reality is I have sometimes want to say to them, what British values do you want me to espouse? Is it the hypocritical British values that you want me to espouse, or the values that are universal in terms of human rights? And I also have noticed that, recently there was a case in the paper where this right-wing youth apparently attempted 6 times to blow things up. But his name's been withheld, and it's a small paragraph somewhere in the middle of nothing in the paper. So I was just wondering whether you could give us any information as to who we can go to in the event. And is there any hope? I know you said there is hope and there are activists, but from the way we're seeing things, it doesn't seem like it.
The IHRC is one great organization, the Islamic Human Rights Commission. HUGS as a charity is a fantastic organization, and it does work with families of prisoners, Muslim prisoners, but it also does really important work with individuals, so support work with individuals and families of people who are being caught up in the war on terror in various ways. There's also a host of really good lawyers. So Bimberg Pierce, for all of this stuff, is the best. And there's lots of other good solicitors around, but they're the ones that have kind of litigated a lot of the high-profile counterterrorism cases. And there are other organizations too. I think that I think that there's such a need, because I think within, so within spaces like this, within separate communities or separate mosques or gatherings, there is increasing awareness. But I can't stress how important or how powerful it could be if various different kind of factions, different sort of community organizations, different communities around different mosques came together. It would be so forceful and so powerful, because there is a demand or a want to have a bigger kind of movement. I think one of the insidious things about counterterrorism policing, because it's preemptive policing for the most part, it's polices on on things that haven't yet happened, and the way in which it's targeted children through schools, through Channel, through the Prevent program, is that, and what you just said about kind of association, guilt by association, is that it has made people afraid to sort of speak out, or made people afraid to come together, or to kind of, and as scary as it is, the way in which we fight back is, by coming together and by holding strong and by speaking out. They want people to they want people to be quiet. They want people to not say anything. There are mums groups. So Malia Boatia, who was she was the former head of the NUS. Yeah. So she knows of mothers organizing against Prevent that are targeting their children. There are mobilizations, there are people organizing. We need a kind of way in which more and more, grassroots communities come together to make this as big and as powerful, because the strength is in numbers. There is the will there.
He's an immigrant himself, and I wonder where, if anything were to happen, where are we going to send him? And if Boris Johnson comes in, are we going to strip him of his nationality and send him back to Turkey? Hopefully.
I think there'll be a queue to do that.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting talk. It's very interesting when we go to airport and we have this search. We didn't have this before. Now I could see it is getting bigger every time. It's really become an industry. You cannot really do with it because there are a lot of people organizing it, benefiting from it, etc. It's become an industry. I think anti-terrorism also become an industry. And I think is growing up bigger and bigger. And I think the extradition process also, that's getting a busy and a big industry. It's very funny. Therefore, we came to the question, what is the aim of these old industries? If they are looking for the terrorist, they already know everything we say on the mobile, any text we send, everything. We are really an open society here. Therefore, if they want me or they can pick up anybody, they can. They know everything what we do. Not only that, actually, if they're looking for the terrorist, we have a lot of them in Iraq. I mean, if they want them, we could ship them to them. I mean, the French didn't want them, the European didn't want them, and we have to force them, and I think really we are stuck with them. And there are many, many of them. We have about 25,000 actually refugees related to the terrorists, and they are different nationalities. And they dump them on them, they don't want them. That's my introduction. My question is, wherever we go, actually, sometimes this forms in this country, they say, do you have another passport? Is that really put us in a suspicious position if we are dual nationality? And how important is if we lie. Because if you go to the state, United States, I mean, I don't care here because I feel very safe in this country. But when you travel to United States, first question they ask in the airport, do you have another passport? If I mean, what's the point? Because if I said yes, I mean, will there somebody following me all the time?
I mean, in terms of here, no. I mean, they can, like as I was saying, they can deprive you of your citizenship, even if you don't have another passport. You know, even if you're only British, you know, if they can argue you can acquire citizenship elsewhere. It's not going to be something. The stripping of citizenship isn't going to be something that happens on a mass scale. At this point, I don't think. The point is that it's possible, and the threat is always there. So this fear and this insecurity is playing out and is allowed to play out, and that's what it does. The industry, you know, so yes, Islamophobia is an industry, and I was just saying to one of the sisters over here that the point of all of this, we have to remember that counterterrorism. Is $1 billion. I can't remember the exact figures, but there is a hell of a lot of money that goes into the counterterrorism industry, into prevent, into the various different programs, into the surveillance of meetings, of mosques, of all kinds of political activities that are deemed to be radical or extreme. Puts people in jobs at the same time that the state says there isn't enough money for social and welfare services, at the same time that we've had major cuts, on a program of austerity. So there's a choice, a decision being made to put more and more money into, a security state, into a securitocracy, into a certain way of organizing society. Islamophobia is essential to that. That's its role, that's its function. And so, yeah, I mean, I think just, the US is a question for, about surveillance. So it's like, well, yeah, if you have another passport, there's another way in which we can possibly track you. But yeah, I mean, there are multiple ways. I mean, so far the US doesn't strip citizenship. It's a question of how to track. So one of the so with the ESTA thing, British. If you're traveling on a British passport to the US, you have to fill out now we have to have an ESTA visa. That comes in because the US wanted to impose a special visa for British Pakistanis, because the British passport is a kind of, what do they call it? A free, there's a phrase I can't remember, but a kind of blind. So it didn't used to raise any flags. If you had a British passport, you can go anywhere you want. And the US, when after 9/7, British Pakistanis are one of the key profile tropes, key profiles that the US want to surveil. And the British government say, well, you can't have something just for British Pakistanis. That's discrimination. We can have an ESTA for everyone, and you surveil who you want, and that's why we have the ESTA. So so that's.
Final question from me. Okay.
Thank you very much. I guess my question is, what should we as individuals be doing?
Organize. I mean, organize as a community here. Join other communities that are organizing. I can put you in. So I know that there's a meeting or increasing mobilizations. Is anyone aware of Bradford Literature Festival? And there was a Bradford Literature Festival happens every year, and it's a brilliant literature festival. This year, it's very diverse, very inclusive. This year, it was revealed that the organizers had taken some funding from Building Stronger Britain or something together fund, which is essentially another form of funding from the Prevent from Home Office monies. And so a ton of people, so Sahema, the Brown Hijabi, Mali Boatia, Loki, various other people pulled out of the festival because they didn't want to be part of something that had taken funding from the Home Office. I don't think the Literature Festival is the enemy. They made a mistake, but nevertheless, it raised the profile of the way in which there's a need to do arts, culture, and resistance outside of this industry, outside of this thing where we take money from the Home Office to do integration or to do multicultural work or to do inclusion. Anyway, long story short, there was an alternative event held last weekend, and there is now a kind of real desire, a growing movement and an urgency for a meeting. Apparently, I couldn't make it, but there's a real buzz around the meeting. I think 150, 200 people attended to do more. And there is a meeting that's going to be organized maybe end of July. So that's something. But I mean, obviously, there's never going to be kind of one place where everybody can get to. I think the biggest thing is that we shouldn't be working individually. We should be working collectively. Within communities, across communities, but in a way that isn't just about doing welfare and support, but actually the hardcore resistance against. So refusing to take prevent money, refusing to surveil, refusing to report, refusing to allow some of the kind of insidious elements of the state into our kind of safe spaces and fighting it back, being more critical when we hear about individuals being arrested or criminalized under counterterrorism legislation, and I guess just organizing. But I think it takes a collective, and it's about finding those collectives.
Final question.
No, thank you very much for the talk. I'm just a little bit worried here. You mentioned earlier on that people were picked up, arrested, just for being associated, being in the same place as someone else. I know you're saying be collective, be together, but we don't all personally know each other. Could that be a way of where the state's trying to actually pull us apart and ensure that we cannot be collective?
Right. Yeah, but that's, no, but no, but when we organize, we don't have to all know each other, right? So when so for example, the meeting last weekend in Bradford brought together 200 people who didn't necessarily know each other, but now they're part of something. I come here today and I'll send links to Miqdad, I don't have them, which he can distribute, and so you know about these things. Of course the state is, and I'm not trying to, I don't have the answers, I don't have the solutions. I know it's easy for me to sit here as an academic and say, but I have also been active in these campaigns, but so Hamza Hassan did an incredible campaign around Talha's case. I think his campaign was one of the most important. He brought together not just, he didn't just raise profile amongst Muslim communities. He brought the Hillsborough campaigns, the deaths in custody campaigns, a kind of mass spectrum of campaigns across the left. This guy, was incredible. And I think when you look at something like that, you see the possibility. Talha came back. I shouldn't say this actually. Baba and Talha came back, and they came back because of the strength of the resistance. Baba and Talha, when their cases went to court, the judge received mounds of letters, character references, letters from the public, letters from, all kinds of people testifying, saying, who had written to them in prison, saying, how incredible these individuals were. And it's because of that they came back. So there is a possibility, it has happened. There are examples of actually how this is, Dalha has done a master's. He's going on to do a PhD. That's incredible. There are lights. I should have said that, and I'm sorry that I didn't. The Rizwan Sabir, there are loads of campaign stories where, because of a kind of campaign, because of the strength of hit back, that individuals now walk free. That there've been wins. So it is possible, but it requires more. It requires mobilizing across communities. It requires not understanding that, of course, the state tries to individualize us and tries to target in ways that isolate us. And I guess it's not easy, but the response is to not allow anybody to become isolated in whatever way that might be. But, is to kind of, is to be brave.
On that very strong note, thank you very much. Salawat.